everybody. Happy Friday. I'm glad you're here. People are already enjoying the video that I show when I go live for real out on the internet. I really like that one too. I love waterfalls, so I'm really glad that you guys like it too. We've got Kathleen in the house, Peter, these are on Facebook, Susan, who loves the waterfall, and Allison, who says the waterfall is very calming. Let's make sure I'm not streaming everywhere. Okay, cool. And Pat says happy Friday. So this is the pre-show where we make sure that the tech is working and comments are flowing in, which they are, which is cool. And also the question of the day, which today is, I want you to rate your file name strategy from 0 to 5. Obviously 0 is it pretty much sucks, and 5 is you think that you do a pretty good job of organizing your files on your hard drives. Okay, so let's see what we get. Hey Christine, good to see you. So I'm a little sad today because, I don't know, I feel kind of weird because today's the last episode of season 1. So when I did the Fast Tip Friday videos for 2 years, every Friday I released a new video. I literally committed to doing it every Friday, and then it just went on and on and on, and it lasted for 2 years. And that's a lot of commitment. So this time around, when I started this live show, I decided to, I guess I needed to build in some breaks. So I decided to make the show seasons. And so season 1, you know, I was nervous with the whole live thing because I'm a perfectionist and I like everything perfect. So doing things live, there's so much room for things to go wrong. So I committed to myself that I would do 10 episodes. So today, I can't believe it, I started October 6th. That was a Friday. I did episode 0 just to get the audience ready for what I was about to do, talk about the show format, and how to interact with me live. And then since then, I've been doing an episode every Friday, and today is the last one of season 1. It's kind of cool because I do get a break, and I have a bunch of things I want to get done over the holidays. Yeah, so I really appreciate the people that have been here for season 1. As I was learning how to do live, as I was adding layers of complexity each week, as I was trying out different graphics and everything. So I sort of have it down now for the most of the complexity. I have a few more layers I want to add, but I really got used to how to do the show and how to present graphically while I'm live, how to put me on the camera, how to get my eyes on the camera so I'm talking to you on the other side of the camera. So I'm really excited about season 2, which will start back up in January. And I'm going to change the setup so it looks different. You know, the background will look different. And I'm going to try to do more interviews. I didn't want to commit to too many interviews in season 1 because I wanted to, like I said, learn the technology. So, all right. So let's see. We've got Kathleen says 4.5. Peter says 4. Pat says 4. Peter, I'm sure you're at 5. I just get this feeling. Pat says she's a 4. Rebecca says she's a 4. Allison says she's a 4. Oh, I see some trending here. Susan says she's a 4. I name them what they are about, so I always know what they are, and I have systems to track versions. Okay, cool. Wade just says happy holidays over from YouTube. And now he says that he's rating his file name strategy a 4. Oh, that's pretty cool that you guys, I mean, if you're in the litigation support industry or in a technical field, you might have, you know, systems that you've had to put into place. So That's pretty cool. I love the confidence. And Juan over on YouTube says 4. Okay. All right. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited about that, actually. I was expecting more lower numbers. Love the confidence. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get the show started. Timer's gone down to 0. Okay. Welcome to the Legal Tech Mastery Show. My name is Amy Bowser-Rollins, and I'm really excited to have you guys here for the last episode, episode 10 of season 1. I'm going to take a break for the holidays and come back in January. So I'm really excited to have you guys here for this last episode. I decided to do something a little bit geeky. I don't know. It's a little bit geeky, and I geek out about it, but some people probably don't. But I hope that you can walk away today with at least some, maybe some hints or some ideas for for ways to do things differently than you do it now. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you have a really good system, and I'm just gonna, share what my system is. But we'll see. So let's see. Let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, actually I have a couple of things in a row about the premise of the way that I think about these things, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty of details. Okay. All right, so the first thing is think big picture. So that's everybody knows what that means, and that's pretty self-explanatory, but my natural way of being about everything I do is big picture, so it comes natural to me. So if you're like me, then you probably, think this way anyway. All right, so and this is something that people don't think about usually, unless they've been there, done that, and gotten burned by not thinking this way. And that is to think long term. So whatever decision you're about to make about naming your files and folders and things like that, you have to think about the future. You have to think about, it's not, so I'm going to pick on my husband a little bit right now. He doesn't have systems like this. He has his own way of doing things, and it's in his own world, and it's very Kel-ish, like it's his thing. But I'm very team oriented, and so and I'm OCD, so so I have systems for everything, and you have to always think about who's going to be looking for this file in the future. And in the legal industry, everybody understands this because they know that attorneys are constantly looking for something that someone else did 6 months ago, a year ago, okay? So a lot of people are naming something on the fly. They don't really put any much thought into it, and they save it to their desktop, and then they end up with all these files all over their desktop. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is collaboration. So always be thinking about the fact that you're probably going to share these files with people, they're, team members or otherwise. And also think about the fact that a new team member, so they're, a new paralegal, a new associate might get hired, and they're coming into your world, and, they're going to work on the case with you. And it would be a lot easier if there was some semblance of structure to what you're doing, okay? All right, this one comes from the database world. Think uniqueness. So make sure that the file is described in a way that it's unique, so you don't end up with letter to opposing counsel everywhere. Okay, so always be thinking about putting enough information into the file name so that it's unique and not duplicative. All right, now this one's a funny one because if you've worked in legal long enough, and I don't know about other industries, you guys can let me know if you're not in legal, if this applies, but 9 times out of 10, the attorney will come to you looking for something that they created or that I created, or that we receive from someone, and their train of thought is almost always, remember last summer when dot dot dot, or remember when we had that deposition, or remember when we had that hearing, or remember when we were getting ready for trial. It's always something related to a time frame or a date, because that's how they remember that something happened, or there's context around it. Okay, so be thinking about that when you're naming your files. Name them in a way that you can find them by the way that the attorney is going to be asking for them. Okay. All right, so this is just another way to say the same thing. Are you more likely to remember a file name? No. Or a time frame? So is the attorney going to come looking for something? The attorney's going to go to the paralegal or to a fellow associate, or partner's going to come to an associate, or they're going to come to lit support and they're going to be looking for something. Are they going to remember what do you think? Are they going to remember the file name? I doubt it. Now, if you have a system, they're going to know parts of the file name because of the system. But are they going to remember the file name? I don't think so. They're going to remember, like I said, that time frame that something happened and we created this thing, and can we find it because I need to reuse it or whatever. Okay, Kathleen is saying, for me, it's a project name plus the date at a minimum. Sounds real good, Kathleen. As we go on, I'm curious to see if you add any other details based on things that I come up with, okay? All right. Think sort order. Nobody thinks this way unless you're a techie. I don't think. I don't think attorneys and paralegals generally, when they're naming things, they don't think about what orders are going to be sorted in. Actually, paralegals do, to the extent that they're putting files in order in a folder, okay? But my brain, because I work in the database side, my brain is always thinking about how this is going to flow, and the sort order of the files or folders. How are they going to look and be presented once the files are named, okay? Let's see what Susan has to say. And it's a very long one. Name files rate context and time. I do event marketing for a client, and someone is always, can you send me XXS from that class last fall? I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up today. If I forget, remind me. And I can't read the rest of it without checking Facebook. Let's see here. 3 classes, organization, context, and date is key. Okay. All right. Juan is saying that the way I'm naming my stuff for my shows is partially my naming conventions, and that is very true. And I knew this would come. Allison, I'm so sorry. When I say things, I'm thinking, globally, but then I have to correct myself because there's always power user paralegals that I love working with that organize their stuff very well. So I apologize, and thank you for calling me out. I appreciate that. Seriously. Okay. All right. Let's see. Now, this, again, is something that I think litigation support definitely thinks this way. I don't think attorneys think this way necessarily, but I do think paralegals also think this way. And that is the information coming into your firm, from someone else, or are you sending it out to someone else? And because of that, we name files a certain way, or we organize them into folders a certain way, because that's our thought process, is what was the source of it, where did we get it from, or who do we send it to, okay? Acronyms. So I'm an Army brat. I was brought up in the world of acronyms, but that's crazy land. But I do tend to, is acronymize a word? In my naming conventions on my personal computer and everything. Like Legal Tech Mastery became LTM like seconds after I decided to call it Legal Tech Mastery, right? Litigation Support Guru is LSG everywhere in my filing system. So I'm acronym happy, and they work really well when you're trying to consolidate a thought process into a file name. But don't go too crazy with them, okay? Then also think repeatable process, and this is so important. I cannot stress this enough. You should only be touching something once, right? You shouldn't have to go back to it over and over again. So once you come up with a system for naming things and for filing things, create templates for those things so that you can just reuse the same thing over and over again and not have to remember what the system is or not to apply the system. There's so much room for human error when you're starting from scratch every single time. So always be thinking about, how can I set this up so that it's done, and then I can just implement it every single time that something changes. For instance, a new client matter. Okay. Now let's talk about sorting. If you're not thinking sort order, then you're going to name things one without leading zeros, okay? My hands are so cold, just like last week. I hate having cold hands, as I'm using them with computers. Okay, if you use leading zeros, you end up with this. The 10, instead of the 10 sorting next to the 1, and then 100 would sort there as well, you end up with something like this. But if you're not a database person, or you haven't been a paralegal, a senior litigation paralegal has got this down, because they've had to put a lot of things in order, many, many times. But always be thinking about leading zeros and whether or not it's a good idea to add them. If you know for a fact that the thing you're naming is never going to get above 9, then you don't really need to worry about it, okay? But if there's a chance it could go into 10, and of course, if you really think that if you're naming something like paralegals name exhibits, and exhibits can definitely get into hundreds, so they might start with 001. But just in general, when you're naming things in a file name, think about leading zeros or not, okay? All right. So a lot of people will name things the top way, which is the year and the month. And they think that it looks clearer than the bottom way, which is to put the number instead of spelling out December, okay, or abbreviating December. Now, visually, I totally agree. Having the month, cut off at 3 characters is easier to read and understand. Even staring at the 12, you have to think for a second, okay, that's December. Just a minute second, or less than a second, You do have to go through that thought process. But again, thinking sort order wise, if you do it with the month spelled out or abbreviated, whatever, you're going to end up, it's not going to be in chronological order. It's going to be in alphabetical order, okay? Peter says, I use the type of document plus the subject plus the date. The type, we're going to get to that. The subject, yep, and definitely the date. For example, if a letter, I use letter _ rent increase _ 1217, which is December 2017, I'm thinking. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see if you change your mind after today, okay? Okay, now we've agreed that we should do numbers, right? Now, most people will do the date the top way, which you just saw. Peter did 1217, okay? If you're in the legal industry where you work on cases that last forever, which we discussed in a previous show, you learn the hard way things cross years. So you need to be able to account for the fact that the documents you're working with, the files you're working with, are going to go from December, like we're in December right now. So you're going to be working on the case this month and you're going to be working on the case next month. So if you don't put the year first, you're going to end up with January, back with January 2017. Okay? Something to think about. All right, now there's some people that think that the 20 is redundant, or not necessary. Okay, so they do things like this. They cut off the year. I can't make myself do this, but okay, cool. I have somebody Susan's feeling me. I don't have a big cup of tea, Susan. I'm going to get some hot chocolate after this, though. I don't drink coffee, so. All right. So do you know anybody that does this? Do you do this yourself? Do you work around anybody that cuts off the beginning of the year? Ooh. Susan says, agreed, except when I work with a global team, then I use 3-character month to avoid confusion. 3-character month to avoid confusion. Can you elaborate on that, Kathleen? I haven't worked with global teams a lot. I mean, I work with an India team, but this hasn't come up. So can you elaborate as to why that's a good idea so we can share with everybody? Okay, so I'm curious if you guys know anybody that does this. Don't do it. Talk about confusing. We talked about collaboration and making things understandable to other people, not just you, okay? All right, now this is, so most people, once I get them to switch to doing the year first, they'll do it like the one above, and I actually do the one below. Now, I get complaints about it all the time, not in my litigation support world. Nobody's going to complain there because they understand it and they can read it. But when I work with people on my legal team, if I'm going to be if that document is going to be shared with other people on the legal team, I tend to add the dashes just to appease, just so they can say that they can read it better. I mean, I don't have any problem reading 1215 in the bottom one, but some people really, really want those dashes. Okay, let's see what Peter says. I cut off the beginning of the year, but I only ever express the date as I would say it. Month, but day, year. Yeah, even with that example, I would do 4 characters for the year. I don't know why. It looks naked. That's not the right word, I'm sure, but it looks naked for me without it. Nicole says, yeah, we did this for our files, database, and access, because therein lies the database connection. And Allison says, because other countries do day, month instead of month, day. I know that, but so December, I need Kathleen to spell it out for me. Allison says, characters count, love your final way. Yes. Again, I try to be collaborative, so if it's in my world or I'm working with Lit Support Team, we're going to do it this way. She's right, characters count. We're going to talk about that in a second. All right, here's Kathleen coming back to me. Almost everyone in the U.S. uses month, day, year, but elsewhere, day, month is the norm. Yep, using 3-character months means no one has to get. Oh, okay, thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, so she's avoiding confusion for the sake of avoiding confusion. Interesting. Yeah, I guess another thing to think about. So she's thinking big picture and she's thinking collaboration. So toot Kathleen's horn. High five. High five. All right. Now, I bring this up. I threw this in here. It's not a date related thing, but when I'm making my case for this, no dashes, then I tell the attorney or the paralegal, whoever I'm working with, I go, well, you take the dash out of the base number all the time. And of course, some of them don't. Some of them insist on that dash, but I take it out all the time. And they also try to put spaces. So in the legal world, we have to add prefixes and then a sequential number, and we number every single page that we produce to the other side. So this would be page 152 of a production. And the MCL would stand for something related to the case, the client name or something like that. So back in the day, attorneys would always try to get me to put a space after the prefix, so MCL space. Thank God I could stop saying, well, that's not good. I could just say the database can't handle it because summation couldn't handle it. So that was really cool. But I try to talk them out of putting the dash because, again, like Allison said, characters count everywhere in everything we do in legal. So if you can handle without a dash and a Bates number, you should be able to handle without a dash and a date. I'm just saying, I don't know. All right. All right, Kathleen is following up the difference between May 9, 2007 and September 5, 2017. Oh, I see what you're saying. If you reverse them. Yep, May 9 versus... Yep, I got it. Okay. Now, I sort of already alluded to this, but on the left-hand side is if you put the year last. So you're moseying along in 2017, you're naming things in April and September and December, and then all of a sudden you get into the new year and you name something and all of a sudden it sorts to the top. Not cool. So another reason to put the year first, as previously discussed. All right, Wade's following up on my Bates number comment. How many do document level numbering versus page level numbering? Yeah, you guys can chime in. That's Wade on YouTube, but now that you see it on the screen, you can chime in if you're doing document numbering. I've only had to do it when I've had to do it. So I really haven't done it in a long time. So, but there's a time and a place for it, definitely. But again, look at all those leading zeros and look at the underscore at the end, which we're going to talk about underscores in a little bit. Okay, now, so the top one is an example of what most people are doing. And then the bottom is a better example. And then, of course, I'm going to take out the dashes. But again, I'm not going to take out the dashes if I'm working with somebody who, loves the dashes, or prefers, I should say, prefers the dashes. So Allison, I assume you're answering Wade's question. It depends on the case. I would agree. And Rebecca is saying always page level numbering. And Luis is saying document level only when I have no choice. Which we lose our choices all the time, don't we? Okay, so here's an example of adding a suffix. So if I got a file from somebody that's named the first way, obviously I already said they're going to send it to me the first way here with the file name and then the date. I have been known to rename the file so that it looks like the second option. Yep. And then I send it back to them like the top option here or the bottom one. So, and this is for collaboration when you've edited a file, people are sending it around. They want everyone's input. It kills me when one person will send a file to 5 people, okay, and ask for their feedback. It kills me when people return the file to the person who sent it to them named exactly the same way. And I do mean exactly the same way, the same date, even though it's 3 days later, and no differentiation of the fact that they just edited it. Kills me. So if I'm working with somebody who knows me and knows my system, I can put my initials ALB and they just know it makes sense, it flows. But if I'm working with somebody I'm not sure, they might not understand why I put ALB, or they might not even know my initials. Then I'll put ALB edits. And that's just, sometimes I put edited. That's a mood thing. But I just basically want to discuss the fact that if you're collaborating with somebody, think about adding a suffix that shows who you are, who the person is. Okay? All right. Same thing with versions. Susan mentioned that she's good at versioning things. So it doesn't really matter how you do your versions. This is just an example, V1. Again, minimal characters, but version 1. And then following up. So if somebody sends me version 1 of something, they've already named it version 1, then I'll just edit it and add my initials. If they don't put a version number, I have been known to return it with my edits and add a version 1 if I know that we're going to have an iterative, speaking is required, an iterative process, and I know that we're going to end up with a final version after many, many, rounds of going back and forth. But, I don't know. I'm kind of picky about these things, so I have been known to rename people's files when I send it back to them. I guess I'm sort of training by example. All right. If you work in e-discovery, you've come across some amazing things that people do with their file names because they don't understand the ramifications. And I put good versus evil on purpose because we collect documents from other people. So, whoever those people are, people out in other industries naming files every day of their life, right? We come around in a litigation matter and collect those files electronically. We correct the electronic version. So we're getting this. I can't tell you how many people are adding things after the file extension. Crazy town. Kathleen and I are twins. Sending edited files back with the same exact name is so wrong. Yes. High five to Kathleen. Just can't see me. High five. High five. Here it is. High five. All right, so please don't let anyone do this. I'm making fun of the people that we've collected data from when I'm doing this, but if you're even coming close to put anything after a file extension, please don't do it. Our systems rely on the file extension for many things that we do. So these kinds of files get spit out because they're causing confusion. Okay, let's see. Susan, I love this collaboration today. Susan does version 01 or 02. If newish document is going back and forth, we just throw our initials at the end of the file so it can look like this. File name SC. Oh, yeah, I've done that too. Yep. Yeah, adding parens without adding spaces or anything. That's pretty cool. It all runs together. Oh, and then, so she's saying Susan starts it, then it goes to Amy, then it goes probably back and forth. So you can see how many times it went back and forth. Yep. Yep. Good job, Susan. All right. Let's talk about drafts and finals for a second. So a lot of people like to add, and especially in legal, like to add the word draft. Totally cool with it. As long as eventually you say the opposite of that. So some people start with the file name, whatever it is, put in draft, eventually get a final version, and God forbid the final version is still named draft. But otherwise, they'll just take the word draft out of it. And then you end up with a bunch of file names in a folder that say draft, 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 different dates, whatever, different versions, whatever, right? And then you end up with maybe a file that doesn't have the word draft and doesn't have a version number, hopefully, and it just sits there. And when you're going back in later, remember, this is a time frame thing. So you're going back 3 to 6 months later, a year later, trying to find that final version of such and such document. Wouldn't it be extra special if you had the word final in it? I think so. All righty. Ooh, we have a debate here. Allison, please don't use parens, messes up PDFs for future processing. So I don't think Susan has to worry about it. She's in a different industry, but good points, Allison. And Barbara is saying hello. Good to see you here, Barbara. Okay, so that's draft and final. Now, along those lines, um, I read a blog post from Sam Glover at Lawyerist, and he said he likes to do this. He was writing a blog post on naming conventions and his way of organizing things. And to him, if it's in a Word version, then Microsoft Word, then it's still a draft. But as soon as it becomes a final, he makes a PDF of it. And we, in legal, we do this all the time because we're emailing out a PDF version to whoever as the final version. But he literally does it by the file extension, and he also puts them in different folders. So he has a drafts folder, and then he has folders for whatever type of document it was. So the final version will go into that. The PDF version will go into that folder. I'm uncomfortable with this, but that's his system, and it works for him. So I wanted to bring it up in case somebody else liked that idea. We're definitely creating PDF versions. But this is what mine would look like. So I will have several drafts, and as they're going back and forth, or even if okay, let's make a point here. We talked about collaboration and sending files back and forth between people, but what if you're just drafting it yourself? I personally, and you guys might want to do this, even if you're the only one touching the document, you might want to create different copies of it. Because what happens when you change your mind? Which we do, right? So I am known for creating a hell of a lot of versions of things, just so I can always step backwards a step or 2 steps, right? A lot of the document management systems that we have in legal, they're enterprise level systems. They offer versioning, and you can always get back to a previous version, so that's nice. But if you're not working in a document management system, but here was my point. I end up with a final Word version, and then 9 times out of 10, we're sending a PDF to somebody, just because it's more universal. Okay, let's see. Susan. I have a client who doesn't consider it final unless the final version says file name final. One final is not considered completed. Really? That's hilarious. That is actually funny. Can you imagine all the files on her or his hard drive that says final? That's funny. That's hilarious. Thank you for sharing that, Susan. All right, Juan is saying, or any special characters. Yeah, there's only some characters that you should include in file names. You should not do any of the others. Dinah, a former student. Hi, Dinah. I love that. That's what I do all the time. Ramesh is in the house on Facebook this time. He switches back and forth between Facebook and YouTube. Ooh, Kathleen. The final, updated final happens all the time in my world. And Susan's friend does it on purpose. Oh my God. Barbara says, glad I'm not the only person with final. See, if you come up with a system, you should only need to do final once. Ugh. Dinah says that's a great idea. It's hilarious. Okay. Moving on to a real-ish file name. So let's say that you, in the top example, you're sending a letter to John Smith. We're adding Esquire because we want to make sure that people know he's an attorney, and it's about a motion to dismiss, okay? Now, some people spill all that out. But people have been around the block a few times. Paralegals and lit support. And some actually legal secretaries too. Start getting creative to make these shorter. So we do a lot of 3-letter um, acronyms for file types. So Peter was alluding to that earlier. So we do a lot of letter, that's an example. Now for the J. Smith Esquire, J. Smith is how we have to do our time entry. We have to do J period space Smith when we say that we did something, we were on the phone with him, or we, had a conversation or whatever. So it's almost makes sense to abbreviate in a file name the same way we do our time entry. Now, the Esquire, again, it depends on the case whether that's important. You want to clarify, this is John Smith, the lawyer, not John Smith, the, this witness or something like that. And then I just made up the MTD. I'm sure that Allison's probably going to come up with a better example. Allison, let me know what you would do for motion to dismiss if you were abbreviating it. But you get the idea. But the yellow text, let's pay attention to the yellow text for a second. It's a good idea to drop vowels because sometimes that's the easiest thing to do, and you can still kind of figure out what the acronym is, the shortened version is. But I worked with somebody who took out every single vowel. That was her thing. She just had to take out vowels. So she ended up with all these consonants next to each other that you couldn't tell what the word was anymore. So I'm saying don't go crazy. And the second mention is that you can get creative all you want, but is somebody going to freaking understand what you meant? So I think motion to dismiss might be good, but that's not my forte. So let's see what Allison comes up with. Dinah says she uses my system of doc and PDF versions. Dave Hancock, I'm so glad to see you here. He's been a little wordy, so let me figure out what I encounter far too often is a crazy long relative path. That's geek speak. We're going to talk about that in a second. With many, many, many layers of files, subfiles, as well as really long descriptive file names, instead of Dave's horse, that's your example, Dave? .pdf. And now I have to go over to Facebook and see what the rest he said. It's more like, Dave, if you're on Facebook, you already see this. If you're on YouTube, he basically did he created a file name with no spaces, no dashes, that's as long, it's really, really, really long. Because Dave has a great sense of humor. All right, my comments cut off at 200 characters, Dave. Note that for next time. Ooh, Allison's back to me. Cool. Ooh, I did it good! Yay for me! MTC, ROGS, RFP, RFA. So those are requests for things. ROGS, I don't care. But cool. See, she has her own system. Okay, let's go on. Now, to Dave's point of relative path. So this is what people forget. They're minding their own business, they're naming files, and they aren't thinking that these files are living in subfolders, of subfolders, of subfolders, of a parent folder, okay? So you're organizing yourself, which is excellent, but in the end, in our world, in the geeky side, when we're collecting those documents, we're copying them. And Windows has a limit of how many characters that we can copy at one time. So this is what my husband does. He works in this side of litigation support where the data's come in and he's got to get it into their processing software. So his team is dragging and dropping files, or whatever, copying files from one spot to another. But have you even ever done it on yourself, on your own at work? Tried to copy a file from one server to another, or one location from a server to a hard drive or something like that, and gotten errors along the way. And we have various tools that we use, software copying tools, to get around some of this. And actually, in my research to figure out if this was still true yesterday, and the reason I said 255 to 260 is people are saying two different things, is that as of Windows, actually, I'm not sure if it's 7 or 10 or just 10, but I found this article where you can go into the registry settings and disable that limitation. And because my husband is always complaining about this, I sent it to him and he hadn't seen it yet, so he's very happy. But look at this path. So we talked about the file name, right? Look at the parent folder, the subfolders, right, with multiple words. I counted up the characters. I pasted it into a text editor and it told me the answer. 117 characters, okay? Now, look at that long thing, that long path. We call it a file path, okay? It's that long path is only 117. And I just got through telling you that a lot of the data that we collect from people out there in different industries, they've managed to get it above 260 characters. Oh, Ollie's in the house. My favorite file name topic. Don't get caught in 256 character no man's land. Ooh. Allison, or download a zip file and then the errors. Oh, that's a good point. Yep. Well, all the errors start popping up when you're unzipping. Allison is very knowledgeable. Okay. I'm going to bring this up because I, in the past, have encouraged people to use underscores, and now I'm not going to do that anymore. I tend to put underscores like between prefixes and suffixes, and maybe that might still work out okay. But like if you're staying in the Office world, the Microsoft Office world, this won't be an issue. But if you're going across platforms, Windows, Linux, Mac, different sources of indexes of words, you have to be careful because the underscores might be so I saw two things. One is in the hex world, an underscore would be considered a word, so that would be confusing. And also I saw that underscores are being ignored, so you end up with this big gobbledygook word that Dave just showed us. So it's another reason, I guess, to... and I read this article yesterday because I do research for these shows. I read this funny article from this guy who said he used underscores like everywhere for 20 years. So he called himself a recovering underscore addict because he's now switched to dashes. And basically they said Google loves dashes. So here's an example of if you're using spaces, which spaces just, they feel right, they just, but you have to think about what you're going to do with those files next. This is an example of where it might affect us. If we're writing, we talked about batch files in several of the shows so far, but if you're just going to DOS and you're, okay, Wade, this is for you, going to DOS, running your xcopy command from there. Wade was talking really geeky last week, going over the context of the what I was trying to say last week. Keep it simple, Wade. But anyways, if we're using xcopy, for instance, to copy data from one location to another, if there's spaces, and when I teach students and newbies how to make batch files, I have to show them how to add the quotes around the files because the folder or the file name might have a space. Now, this doesn't mean that you should use spaces because or not use spaces because this might happen, but just it's something to think about if you're going to be copying the files, or if you don't feel like trying to figure out how to add the quotes every time. But if this doesn't hit you personally, then don't worry about it. But it's bound to hit someone else personally. You're creating the stuff and then someone else has to deal with your files. I have trouble typing a dash between every word. It feels weird. I have made myself do it in certain circumstances, especially if I'm dealing with web-based stuff. And we're going to get to that right now. So this example, pretty much everyone knows this because they've seen it in the URLs these days. But just so you know, spaces is going to translate in the web-based world to having these %20s. Okay, so Susan says the challenge I run into with paths in unzipping folders is they want to create new folders, which increases the path substantially. So if I unzip something with a bunch of subfolders, I've been known to drag it back into my system and get rid of all the extra folders. So good point, Susan. And Allison is taking my compliment. Bill, good to see you here. And Kathleen, going old school. Sometimes we just go back to DOS to do what we need to do. And if I have someone like Allison, around, I would show her how to do stuff in DOS. Okay, and then this is an example of putting dashes in your file name, and then if you were to put them up, put them up on your server for your website, this is what they would come out as, which is easier to read, right? That's just, I don't know. It's aesthetic stuff rather than, I don't know. I just want to bring it to your attention in case you care. So this was part of one article that I was reading about spaces being tricky if you're switching between platforms, and the fact that it can handle strings unpredictably. So he's basically saying if you only use Windows, don't worry about it, but a good practice is to stay away from spaces and file names. So some people I was reading, they think it's so easy to type a dash in between every word. I don't think so. And I type 140 words a minute. I don't think do dash dash. I guess. Oh no, it feels weird. All right. So couple more stuff here. Just 2 or 3 more slides. Now that we talked about file naming, I just want to mention the organization of those files. So this is what I teach my paralegal students and my newbie lit support people. And this is a structure, a folder structure that I've come to like over the years. I've tweaked it over the years. But in the yellow text in the second sentence, I encourage you to meet with your entire team. This is what I did at Piper. This is what I did at Robbins Russell. We got together as a team and decided how we were going to organize this. I don't think it should come from the top down. I don't think somebody should just mandate this is what it is. I think that you're going to get buy-in better if you decide as a team how to organize things. So notice the productions folder is for outgoing data. The reports, I explain what goes into the reports folder. Those are things that we do as we're managing cases. Source data, we had trouble naming that one. But we ended up with source data, and it's basically things that are coming from outside the firm into our firm, but from all 3, we don't have separate folders for each, source. And then vendor is literally, it came from the vendor. So if you're looking, and then the last one is working. So anything that we're just manipulating files and, doing our thing in litigation support, that's what we put into working. I do not save anything to the root of a folder. So there's nothing in so the client matter is where the zeros are, the client number and the matter number. There, you won't see files in that parent folder. You won't see files at the root of that in my world. And then in each of those folders, you might have template files. So basically you create your structure and then you copy and paste that structure for each client matter number. All right, so this is a version from an attorney. It was actually the Sam Glover from Lawyerist. I just put it in here. I know that at my firms, the attorneys sort of come up with their own systems in-house at each firm. Each firm I've gone to, the foldering is different. And then there's always people that don't believe in the system, and so they just are renegades and they do their own thing. And then, as I put on the right-hand side, there's some attorneys that they're doing a letter and they don't want to put it in the client matter correspondence folder. Instead, they create, under correspondence, they create a folder that's their name and they put their stuff in there. So imagine when other people are trying to go look for it, that letter to so-and-so, they have to go into all these subfolders. Basically, they have to run a search. because it's not in the Client Matters correspondence folder like they expect. All right, I think this is the last slide. I think this is hilarious that I took my litigation support way of doing things and my personal way of doing things and moved it right over into my Legal Tech Mastery show. So I have a folder that's the season and the episode number, and then a little blurb of the description so I don't have to remember what episode 10 was. And then these are my subfolders, and I've been using the system for this season. So anything I do graphics-wise goes into the graphics folder. You can just basically read this. But I wanted to let you know in the prep folder, I actually have a PowerPoint template that's named a certain way. It's named S01E10, and I rename it. And I'm doing a PowerPoint right now. So I have it all set up, ready to go. All I need to do is fill in the slides. And then I also have a template for the notes that I put on my other monitor, because that's a 4x4 grid. And then I have a template for all my social media text that I have to copy and paste into all the platforms. So I just have a template for that, and I just plug in the URLs and the description in that text file, and then I use that text file everywhere I'm pasting into to social media. Anyways, it's pretty cool that I was able to apply this right into a new world. All right, let's see. Sarah Kennedy says, I start with a date. Ooh, she's got some periods in there. XYZ agreement, draft with brackets, or final. I would be nervous about the brackets, but I'm glad you got the draft or final. And yeah, I forgot to mention that a lot of people use periods instead of dashes for the dates. I use periods for phone numbers. I don't know why. It just looks good for phone numbers for me. This is all personal preference type stuff, right? My main thing is, if you have a personal preference, come up with a system and implement it. Don't do something different on Tuesday and something different on Friday. Thanks for the info on versus. Great insight. I've been using an underscore so often. Yeah, me too. Ooh, Allison has a question. What are your thoughts on all uppercase or all lowercase versus proper case? I'm glad you asked, Allison. So I'm an initial cap person. For a lot of things I do, especially, I don't know. For some things, I'm always initial cap, like titles of things. Other things, I'm sentence cap. And I really hate all uppercase. And I had a guy on my team that it did everything all lowercase. And it stood out like a sore thumb as, I asked him why. He said, 'cause I'm lazy. I don't know. All right, let's see. Susan says she also uses periods for phone numbers. Is it European? Okay. I saw someone do it years ago and I picked up on it. They use periods for phone numbers in the rest of the world. Yep, maybe I just saw somebody do it. Anyways, I'm going to let you guys go. This is the longest show. Look at that time. That's the longest show I've done. But it was fun because you guys were interacting with me and we were collaborating together. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye, and like I said in the beginning, in the pre-show, this is the end of season 1, so episode 10, and I think I'm going to do 10 episodes each season. Let's see if I change my mind. But I'll be back in January. I'm not sure yet whether it'll be the first week or the second week of January, but I will definitely be back, and I'll have more interviews. Okay? Take care and have a good weekend.